Shalom Alechem, Assalamu Alaikum. Welcome to 2 Chronicles chapter 34, in which there are 33 verses. Beginning in verse 5, we see that cremation is actually done here, but not in a kind way anyway. It says here, he burnt the bones of the priests upon the altars. These are the priests of those who worshipped these. Starts with a B. And purged Judah and Jerusalem. So this was done, this burning of bones, to purge or cleanse the land, perhaps even erase their memory. Verse 6, we see here places versus mattocks, and that word means swords, which doesn't make sense, a sword. Moving ahead to verse 9. It reads here, of the dwellers in Jerusalem, versus and they returned to Jerusalem. So the difference is in the Septuagint, it's describing the money that was collected by the dwellers in Jerusalem versus those who delivered the money to Jerusalem, referring to them, the people themselves versus the money. Verse 11, this is the focus of the video, the thumbnail anyway, talks about they gave it also to the carpenters and builders. This was the occupation that Adonai Yeshua HaMashiach had as a human being, a carpenter. But what were his tools? What were his materials that he used? Well, it says here to buy squared stones and timber for beams to cover the houses which the kings of Judah had destroyed. So the common misconception is that when they say Jesus or Yeshua was a carpenter, he was working with a lot of wood. I don't discount that he was working with wood, but when we look at a house from the Middle East, most of it is made of stone. Just look at this image here. Roof, cut stone, dressed stone, interior, plaster, courtyard. Most of it is stone is stone. Just defeat the whole purpose of me saying what he just said. Okay. And that's how houses were built. They were made out, or I should say, that's what houses were built of in that day. Mostly stone. So squared stones, and yes, they would use timber for beams. And even in the thumbnail, there's like a ancient measuring tool that was used to cut well, I'm not sure what that was for, but that was an ancient tool used back then. Perhaps in his time, Yeshua's time, they used that. I don't know. But I thought that was visually appealing, so you will see that if you haven't seen that already. The thumbnail, quite eye-catching. And it describes to cover the houses versus to floor the houses. So one is to provide a roof or a covering versus a floor. Verse 12 says here to oversee. To oversee versus to set it forward. Moving ahead, verse 16 now. Uses the word account. Gave an account versus gave word. So it describes this is all the money given versus all that was committed. So we can see, it is talking about the money, not just anything in general. It's specifically money. Verse 17, collected the money again. The footnote reads here in the Greek melted. So they melted the money. That's one option perhaps. It's a little drastic, but that is the footnote. Verse 22, who kept the commandments versus keeper of the wardrobe. So those are, I would say that's a significant difference. If you want to keep the commandments, it's one thing to follow the Torah. If you want to keep somebody's wardrobe, that's more of a fashion advisor, isn't it? A stylist. Ancient stylist, maybe. Verse 24, words. This is a really interesting, actually significant difference. Thus saith Hashem, Behold, I bring evil upon this place, even all the words that are written in the book, versus all the curses. And that word can also mean oath, oath of covenant. So that's an interesting difference there, according to the words that are written in the book that was read before the king of Judah. Verse 27, another significant difference in this chapter. We have a lot of them here. Ashamed. His heart was ashamed versus tender, and that word in the Hebrew is rakak, which means soft, weak, tender, timid. No, it's not either of those. It's ashamed. My versus his. That's verse 27. My words versus his words. Why is it my words? Because this is Hashem speaking through the prophet, so the word my makes more sense in this context. There's an addition of the. Can't seem to find the. There it is. I've heard thee. It was added by the translator. Verse 31, this is an interesting word being used because we just had a video on this talking about pillars being broken, or was it statues? Well, it's interesting because this word pillar is more likely similar to the pillar that Moses had made, the 12 pillars, one per tribe of Israel, not talking about statues. So it says pillar in the Septuagint versus in his place. So he stood at a pillar. Perhaps it's the king's pillar. Before versus after. Walk before Hashem versus walk after. So walking, seeking after is one way to read that. Verse 32, made a covenant in the house of Hashem Elohim versus did according to the covenant. So the first one in the Septuagint is deciding to pledge an oath to make a covenant versus already fulfilling it. So it's already done. He did it. So these are two very different things. One is the beginning of a journey. It's just starting and you're making a covenant. So you have to continue to remain faithful to the covenant. And the Masoretic is talking about the end or the completion of that journey. And there's another mission of in the house of Hashem. And that's all for this chapter. Thank you very much for your time. Till next time, I bid you all shalom aleichem, assalamu alaikum, irini mazisu, pax vobiscum, peace be unto you, and maranatha. I had to get the ch out there.